Now, in questions 5 through 9, they're asking us to find the coordinates of the midpoint of each segment. Now, what would be really great is if all these line segments that were generated in these questions ran parallel to the grid lines on the coordinate grid, because then they would just be horizontal or vertical lines and we could just count this off. But as you can see, these questions are not that. They are lines that would run, as we see them, diagonally across the coordinate grid. It's kind of hard to count the midpoint unless it's something that's got some real precision, some real perfection to it with the graphing. So instead what they want us to do here is to use that formula that was presented to you in the notes and in the book here. The formula for the midpoint says you take the x coordinates and average them, and you take the y coordinates and average them, and that's how you generate the midpoint of the segment. And remember what the midpoint is. It's the point exactly halfway between the endpoints of the line segment. You'll do the same basic procedure here in all of these questions, so let's go ahead and just approach a few of them. Let's start with number 5 there. In number 5, they've got x is 1, 2, and y is 4, 5. So again, the procedure here says add up the x numbers, so that's 1 and 4. And then since you're averaging there, that would of course mean you're going to divide by 2, and that's going to give you the x coordinate of your midpoint. And for the y coordinate, you're going to take your two y values, which are 2 and 5, and add them up. And then divide again by 2, which is the process of averaging, and that will give you the y coordinate of the midpoint. Well, of course, 1 and 4 makes 5, and 2 and 5 makes 7. And you can leave your answer just like that. There's nothing wrong with 5 over 2 and 7 over 2. 5 halves would, of course, be equivalent to 2.5. 7 halves would, of course, be equivalent to 3.5. If you want to change these into decimals, that would also be acceptable. This would be the point 2.5, comma 3.5. Let's try that again, but let's go ahead and take a look at question 9, because question 9 throws the negatives at us, and we want to make sure we're functioning in the same way correctly with the negatives that we did with the positives in number 5. So again, directions say here to find the midpoint, we're going to add up the x values, which are -2 and -1, and divide by 2. And to find the y coordinate of the midpoint, we're going to take my y values, -8 and -7, and add them up and divide by 2. So I've got -2 plus -1, which is -3, and I'm dividing that by 2, and -8 and -7, which is -15, which I'm then dividing by 2. Well, again, there's nothing wrong with those answers. You could leave those just like that if you wanted to. That would, of course, be the equivalence of -1 1/2 and -7.5. But if you want, you can change them into a decimal. That would be -1.5, comma -7.5.